Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to take a look at an automated way to transition between multiple panels when you're doing live events with multiple remote guest panels. So this is going to involve LiveToAir. It's going to involve vMix, some scripting, and other automation tools in vMix. So that's how we're going to put all of this together. But before we do that, as always, I welcome anyone who'd like to comment, ask questions, give us any feedback. Please just post it in the section below, and we'll get to it here on air if we can answer it, or we'll look it up and try to get back to you. Also, if you'd like to join us live on air, we do have a link in the show notes on whatever platform you're on, and you just click on that, and somebody from the studio will get you on with us. So let me get started and talk a little bit about where this came from. One of the folks that I was talking with earlier this week had mentioned the time pressure they were under when moving between one panel, which is coming in remotely, and had to get off air, and getting the second panel up and on air and ready to go live. And I thought of different ways that we could possibly do that, and so I rolled one of these ideas here for today's show. And probably the best way to think of this is, how can you create a workflow which integrates the onboarding, green room, and live guests, and let those all work simultaneously, where you're not limited to being in one of those segments, and then when you have to get to the next segment, there's a scramble. So that's the big goal here. So before we jump into this, let me just say hello to a few people that have joined us. So we have Rudy Engels. Rudy, as always, thanks for joining us. And also Battle for Freedom. Battle, thank you for coming here every week. Really love having you here. We have Samuel Nordvik. He's joining us from Norway. So Samuel, thank you. Definitely appreciate it. And we have Team 4M coming in from, let me see, Holger, Germany. So hello. Thank you for joining us, team. And we also have Biz Shortley. Biz, always good to see you here. Thanks for joining. So let's talk a bit about the basic setup that we're going to be using here. And we'll probably jump into the vMix preset that I have, which would be a good place to start with this. So what I want to be able to do is to take in a panel which has a host and 3 guests. It can be any number you want, but for this demonstration, we want to do it with 3 guests, and be able to take that panel, have them live on air, have a second panel that we can get ready in a green room, and have those people, from whether they're connected fully to just joining a show, we can handle that and bring them in and make this flow happen. And so we have this set up right now, where if you look in here, I have on this side, this is the live panel, and on this side, this is the green room for the guests that are coming in. So these are the 3 guests for panel 2. That is the host for panel 2. And up here, you see the live video coming in from the actual stream, which is over here. So if I wanted to transition, we have this set up so I can do a simple button push. So I just have a Stream Deck set up. And if I say, let's move this over, I now have all of my guests that were in the green room live. And I have the green room now populated with everybody from that original panel, which gives me the chance now to say goodbye to them, to sort of thank them for participating, and then bring on the next group of folks we need to do that. So that's the general model. And we also have in this the ability, regardless of which group is in, to do things like, here is, a 2-box shot. Here is a 3-box shot. Here's a 4-box with the host and all the guests. And the thing is, all of these sort of layered inputs that we have for these shots, if I switch panels, those automatically switch. So we wanted to do something where it didn't require a lot of complexity downstream in your preset for vMix, but allowed you to do everything you wanted pretty comfortably between these two separate panels. And our thinking is that you really only have the live panel and then the off-air background green room panel. It doesn't mean that you only have two panels in your show or event. It simply means that when one panel's live, I have another panel I can work with sort of in the background. And that's why we set it up as a two-panel switch. So how do we do this? Let's dig a little bit into this vMix layout, this preset here. Let me see if I slide this over, get a little more on per screen. Okay, so the way we have this set up is we have two live hosts. So we can say these people are in studio with us with the camera and everything set. Then we have, so that's host A and B here. Then we have panel A, guest 1, 2, and 3. So these are coming in from LiveToAir. These are coming in over NDI. And so we have those three. Then we have panel 2, panel B, which is for guests 1, 2, and 3. And these are also coming in over LiveToAir. Now, the next part though, and this is what really makes all of this work, is that we are not using these inputs directly in any of the things we do in the rest of vMix. So what we are doing here is we are actually setting these up using the mixes. And so we're using vMix 26, so it's beta, but you know, there are different ways you could do this, but with the mixes, which we think will be very popular for these types of things, what I've essentially done is say, this is my guest slot 1, guest slot 2, guest slot 3, and the host slot. And so now anything that I want to use in a terms of a layered composite, I use those 4 mixes to do. And I then, through automation, can decide which is going in to each of those mixes to make sure that I cover the right, you know, basically have the right sources displaying on screen and live. And so this is how we've done this. So we set this up with these 4 mixes, and then everything else downstream basically are just layered stacks using those 4 mixes to create the different frameworks that we need inside the preset for display in the production. The other things that we have here are we have an output. So one of the things that came in the last version of vMix, vMix 25, was the ability to take my output and say, I want to take that as an input. And the reason we do that is because we have a green room. And so if I sort of click over here, this green room receives the output video from the production. And that's basically this. It's taking this input here and using that as one of the layers inside our green room. And in the green room, so this is an interesting piece, and I put this here so we could touch on how we can structure this. If you didn't have all the mixes still in vMix 25, what we are doing in the green room is, let me go through here and just look at the layers, is we are actually taking the actual guest inputs and we're using automation to change them on layers. So this is another way you could do this, where I could turn around and take each one of these inputs and have the layers all preset and just change what's the source that's on them. So that would be another way that you could do this. But we did this for here mainly because we didn't want to go and start using, 15 mixes, primarily because after last week we had some issues with automation of mixes. It could have been stuff we were doing wrong, but we didn't want to take a chance for this. And I thought this would be a good way to sort of show an alternate method. So that's the green room is basically set up not using those mixes, but we specifically go in and change the the inputs on each one of these layers. And that's how we build the green room here. So as the other piece to this, which we'll cover at the end when we talk specifically about audio, is we need to take and have audio that can go back to the different guest sets, whether they're off-air or whether they're on air. And so we have one that we set up, which is for all the green room audio, which includes the master mix plus bus A. And that's, that means they can hear the show, but you can also have, the host or anybody else that needs to talk when they're off air communicating with them. And then we just use bus B for everything that's on air as the return to the guest. One of the things to keep in mind is that LiveToAir is doing audio processing for the mix minus. So we don't want to send all the guest audio back. We only want to send one audio feedback for on air and one audio feedback for off air, and let LiveToAir do the mixes there. So with this sort of as the framework, let me switch over and talk a little bit about the LiveToAir side, and then we can jump into the automation. So in LiveToAir, for each one of these channels, we can set up an on-air video return and audio return and an off-air video return and audio return. So when one of these guests is on air, which you can tell because their channel number is highlighted in red, when one of those guests is on air, what we do is we say, you're going to receive the main video that's coming back from your program. So if I come here and say, okay, I'm doing the 2 guest shot and I'm doing this is exactly what your remote guest would be seeing. For anybody that is off air, so let's go down to this team over here. You can now see that they're in off air mode. They are green channel indicators here, and they are now seeing what is over here in the off air video. So let me just show you what this would look like to the guest. And I can sort of show this from, I have something with the guest perspective here. So if this is what our guests are seeing, so this would be, the guest in channel 3. This is what they're seeing. So if I were to switch them into the green room where I'm taking them off air, I just hit a button. And so for them now, they are seeing something that says, okay, you're off air now. And their video feed has changed. Now they're seeing the off air video feed. But if I were to change them back to on air, you'll see now that they get the on air indicator with the red bar, and they're seeing the live video feed. So that gives you a sense of the guest experience. And LiveToAir, when you go between off air and on air, is switching to that. So if I just go back to the LiveToAir interface for a second, the other thing that you'll see, if I were to switch from the first 3 channels, which is panel A, and switch to channel B, you'll notice that I brought all of panel A off of air. So now these are all off air, and I brought channels 4, 5, and 6, panel B channels, on air. So I'm doing this switch. And the reason we do this is that when a guest channel is off air, it does not send any audio out. It still creates the mix minus. Those guests need to hear each other, and I can send audio back to it, but it's not sending audio out to the studio. So this means that I don't have to worry about this audio when these guests are talking to each other off air creeping into my production feed. That's sort of handled automatically. In our automation, I do show you how we go and would mute them if you're using another mechanism, but we wanted to put that in there so you get a sense of this. So this is really what's happening over here. Guests on air and off air get different video feeds and different audio feeds, and we handle the mix minus going over here, and we change guest state from off air to on air based on whether their panel is active or not. So that's probably a good look at this piece. So before we get into how we do some of this automation, let me just jump back over because we've had a couple more people join us. So we have, let's see, Bruce is giving us an hello from Glasgow, Scotland. Bruce, great to have you here. Thank you. And we have Maxi Baldero joining us from Barbados. Maxi, pleasure having you here. Thank you. Okay, so probably the first place to start would be, let's look a little bit at the scripting we did. Let's actually start with the shortcuts. The shortcuts we did to automate some of the stuff, and we'll look at that inside the vMix setting. So everything that we have set up here, let's see if I get this. Okay, so we have a whole lot of shortcuts here. So by and large, what we're doing here is we have a full script, and we'll go into that next. We have a full script for switching from panel A to panel B. So we have 2 buttons on our Stream Deck, which trigger on panel A or on panel B. We then have a set of scripts that we use for deciding which guest goes into which box. So let me jump out of this for a second to give you a sense of what I mean. So if I am up here, and this is a good, so you right now you can see these 3 guests. If I wanted to turn around and say, okay, who do I want to have in this box sitting right here? I could go around and change that to somebody different. And so I can say, I could put the same guest there, the guest that was there before, or the 3rd guest. So this allows me to sort of control the composition of these boxes. And so I have a whole set of things to say in box 1, which guest do I want? First guest, second guest, third guest. In box 2, which one do I want? First guest, second guest, third guest. So this just gives me a very easy way to do that assignment. And where this could become really useful is something where you'd have like the host plus the guest, and you have a conversation going on, and now I can just sort of jump around and say, okay, now they're talking there, or they're talking here. And it allows me very simply, and you can see I'm basically just glancing down to see which button I'm pressing, but that's it. So now I can have this conversation go on with all of these guests and just decide who I want to show in a 2-box, a 3-box, or a 4-box with everybody. So that is what we did in this next section. So let me open the shortcut section again here. And the way we have this set up is with a dynamic script. So if I open this up, it is not very, very hard to have this thing set up. But all I'm doing is I'm coming back and saying, for my different multi-box shots, I'm using a set layer to say, which guest input do I want assigned to that box? And that's all that I'm doing here. So I'm going to say like input, 15 or 16, like, so the 16 is the sort of a 2-box. If I come here and say, okay, on layer 2, I want input 9. On layer 3, I want input 9. So I'm just going through each one of my input shots and saying, which is the first guest box that I have in there, and which one of the mixes do I want to be applying, which guest mix, for guest 1 mix, guest 2 mix, guest 3 mix. And remember, I'm not putting the actual panel input, the feed that's coming from LiveToAir. I'm actually taking this and putting the mix associated with each one of those feeds into the right box. So again, very, very flexible. If I switch panelists, all of this stuff just works. I don't need to do anything special. But that's all I'm doing. I'm doing the API function to set the layers here and to say which layer gets which guest in it. So, and that's all we did for all of these, for guest slot box 1, box 2, and box 3. Everything else down here is just merges to different ones of the shots. So it is basically a standard. I'm going in, I'm saying I have a Stream Deck button, I'm doing a merge, and I'm doing it to this input. So it's going to take whatever's in program and merge in that input into it. So if an element is there, it does the dynamics. If it's not, it just does sort of a fade between the two. But that's how this is all set up. So all of my shortcuts are effectively agnostic of which panel is on. So I don't have to change any of my shortcuts, and I don't have to change any of my layered multi-box inputs to make any of this work. So that's really everything that we have set up here inside of the core automation. But the bulk of the transition is actually being done to scripts. So I do have, let's sort of jump over here. Let's go into Visual Studio Code here, and we'll take a look at the script that I'm using to do this transition. So we mentioned that everything that we do driven from LiveToAir is based on off-air guest and on-air guest. So we needed a way to go back and tell LiveToAir which guests to switch on-air and off-air. So right here, we are taking the guests that are in channels 1, 2, and 3. So this is panel A. So I'm putting panel A on. So we're coming back and saying, I need, from an automation point of view, to have LiveToAir switch guest 1, channel 2, and channel 3, the 3 guests that we have assigned to panel A. And I want to take those channels and I want to bring them on air. So you can see I'm doing, the command is on air and the payload is the channel. So this is very straightforward. And we're doing this with an exception because we would get a error code back if there was nobody assigned to that channel, or there was nobody on air, nobody connected, even if they were assigned. So this just says, regardless, just switch that on air. If there's nobody there, we don't switch it on air. It just stays in the null state. But so this is what we do for these first 3 channels. We then go and sort of do the opposite. We're coming in here now and switching channels 4, 5, and 6, and we're setting them to go off air. And that's where we have this off air command here. So again, very, very simple, but this is now vMix controlling what's going on in LiveToAir. So it makes it very simple for, you know, the operator here. They don't have to necessarily focus at all on the LiveToAir screen. This is all happening in the background. And that's really all we're doing, going off air and on air. Now, what goes on the vMix side? So for vMix, what we are doing is, the first thing is, and I'll go into this when we talk more about audio, but we're turning around and changing the audio routing for the off-air host and the on-air host, because we don't want the off-air host to be talking in our production. So we actually are using something which is called the channel routing matrix, and I'll jump into that when we get to the audio piece, but that's what we're handling there. And then we're just turning the audio off for these 3 guests in panel B. So channels 6, 7, and 8, we turn the audio off. So those are the actual inputs that are coming in. So LiveToAir will still create the mixes they need for off air, but this actually mutes them inside of the vMix preset. And as I said, if you don't have something like LiveToAir, if you're using, you know, a vMix call or something else, you would probably need to mute those channels or route them potentially into another bus. So different ways to do this, but that should give you just a couple of different ways. And we're just doing this with API.function calls. Set audio off is just muting those channels. And then the flip is that we are now loading the different channels into the green room. So everybody that we just pulled off air, I mentioned that we're doing that by setting the layers, and this is it. So I'm setting the layers for guest 6, 7, and the channel 6, 7, and 8 that are coming in, the inputs in vMix, and we're moving those now to our green room. And one of the inputs, input 21, is our green room input, and this is just the layers that we have in there. And so we're forcing these off-air guests to be in the green room. So when you mute them and you have them in the green room and you route the host audio for that panel, panel B, into the green room as well, you now have a self-contained environment for these guests to all interact away from the main environment, the main production environment. And now I'm sort of doing the other side to this where I'm saying, okay, now let's load in the guest that we want to have in those mixes, those 4 mixes that we have. And so we're going through and saying, I just did the cube input because I thought it was visually more distinct and easier to see. But all I'm doing is saying, I'm taking into mix 1 and putting input 3, 4, and 5. And input 3, 4, and 5 are the LiveToAir inputs 1, 2, and 3 for the panel A. So I'm now assigning those to the mixes, and I'm assigning input 1, which is my host for panel 1, for panel A, into mix 4. So now I've changed all my mixes. So everything that we have stacked up as layers, all of those things are all set now. And then I just go and I make sure I turn on the audio and that it gets routed correctly to the different sections of, for going to master, going to channel, to bus A or to bus C. So we have all that sort of set up in here now. And that's all this does. And we do effectively the exact same thing in reverse for when I switch to B. I just take everybody from A and put them in the green room and do the reverse for mutes and unmutes. So that's everything we have set up here in the scripting. So let me just pause here and see who else we have, that has commented, and we'll get to that. And then I'll jump in to talk a bit more about everything we're doing with the audio and how that routing all takes place. So let's see, we have automation for vMix. Hi from, hopefully I say this, Vargada, Sweden. So thank you, automation, for joining us. Definitely appreciate it. So let's say we have Post Bunny. Whoa, so many programming streams are going on right now. Yep. Thank you for taking the time to join us. And I also see that this is probably something we really appreciate when somebody subscribes to the channel. So Post Bunny, thank you very much for doing the subscription. Definitely appreciate that. So, all right. So let's now talk a little bit about what we're doing with audio. And the first thing, so I probably want to touch on, let's sort of make this a little bit bigger here, is that we have all our buses and everything else going on here. And what we have for inputs, I'll probably squish this even a little more so I get a little more space over here. So what we have now is we have the audio inputs for host A, host B, and then for all the guests in panel A and all the guests in panel B. These are the raw inputs that are coming in for this. And the way we work with this is we have these set up in advance. So these are sort of, where do I want this audio to move and go? But I want to take and change the actual routing inside the channel matrix. And let me show you a bit about where that is. So if you come here and you click on the little gear inside the input channel, let's see if I can. So what this has is all the different settings for this channel, but down here at the bottom is something called the channel matrix. And so what this is going to say is, for this audio that's coming in, where do I want it to actually go? I may turn around and say, open up master, open up bus A, open up bus B, whatever. But I may only decide in the channel route to route it to certain ones of those at any given time. So in this case, if you see here, I say I'm setting here for off-air mode. And all I'm doing is now I'm using the channel matrix for bus A, left and right. So this means that when this is off air, my audio for the host is routed to bus A and bus B. Bus A left and bus A right. Now, if I come out of here, and let me just turn around and say, I'm going to switch. And so right now, I think we'll go to panel A again. If I come back here and look again, you'll now see if I go to channel matrix on host A, you'll now see I'm switched to on air. And so my audio is being routed to the master, to the headphones, and to bus C. So why bus C? What I want to be able to do is I want to be able to send an audio return back to LiveToAir for the on-air guest, where they will hear their host, But I don't want it to return the master because the master has all their audio in it as well. So if I just sent back the master audio to the on-air guest, then they would be hearing echo because they would talk and, half a second later they'd hear their own voice back because it's a round trip for the audio to take. So what I'm doing is I'm routing it to the master and also to bus C. And in LiveToAir, when it says, what audio input do I use for an on-air guest? I'm taking right out of vMix and saying, there's bus C as an NDI feed, and I put that in. And that's what the guests are hearing when they're on air. So this allows me now to both feed the production feed, where I have everything, and to feed the return audio feed, where I just have the host. I could also do this if I set multiple inputs, multiple audio inputs to on air. This would make this same division. So if, say I needed to have an audio playing, I had a playlist, or I had other, a video clip or something like that playing, which had its own audio, I would do the same thing. I just make sure it's routed to master and routed to bus C, and then that audio would get back to the remote guest, and they would hear that without the echo. We would create the mixes. So that's the first element to this. So in doing this, I am actually going back and forth between different mix settings. So and that's one of the things, if you didn't know, it's a really powerful audio feature inside of vMix. I could go in here and I could turn around and say, I want to change this up entirely. I want to take and route this to, F and G and whatever. Okay, what can I do now? I could say, I want to name this and call this alternate. Not sure I spelled that right, but we'll just go. So this is my alternate mix. And then if I switch back over to the Visual Studio Code, you'll see all I did was in here, I called a particular channel matrix preset. And in that case, off air and on air. But if I wanted to use this new mix in something, I set that up, name it, and then I can just turn around and give an API function call or a shortcut to go in and have that pulled up as the way I'm routing audio in that channel at that point in time. Really, really powerful. And by having these presets now, it means I could just do that. If I want to do this to 3 or 4 other channels, that's no problem. I just duplicate this line and change the input number. And that's the extent that I need to go and reconfigure the entire audio routing. One sort of clip there. So that's the first piece. So let's see. So everything that we have, so let's see. We have Wise Master Builder has just said the Matrix. Yes, we have hammer and nails turned to a null gun. So this is, we have a lot of stuff that I'm covering here on the audio piece that's not directly related, but I think this is important because these concepts are going to help with managing audio inside of your productions. And so let's see. So we have, just trying to make sure we have, okay, so I think, we have a lot of conversation going on. I'm not going to jump in the middle because it gets everybody in the chat is talking. But so these are the key things. We have that to route the channel. The other thing we do, and I said this is something that we were doing more as an alternate way, but if you look at where I have the audio here for, this is the first 3 clips for audio for panel A, and we have the next 3 clips, which is audio for panel B. So if you look and I change between panel A and B, you'll see that I have muted the audio on the guests that were coming in for channel A, and I unmuted it for the guests that are coming in on panel B. And, if I flip back, it just does the exact reverse. So this would be sort of a start point potentially, but you can also do it just through the channel matrix, where that would give you the ability to do any type of audio routing that you need for this. So hopefully this was helpful here, and we've covered something that is something you can apply. But I think the concept of how can we do things more quickly, especially with transitions where you're moving out people and then moving in a new set, very, very common in a event production with remote panels. This could be a big help. And that's why I'm so excited about having all those additional mixes in vMix 26. So if you haven't checked out the beta, definitely something to do with vMix. And as always, we've gotten a lot of great feedback on stuff we do with LiveToAir. So if this will be things we'll integrate into other things we do. It's what we use in our studio here to bring on remote guests that want to join us live. So hopefully this was all useful. We will be here again next week, and I haven't picked a show topic yet, but we'll definitely have another show topic. And I would love if you want to hang out and ask any additional questions. We'll have our post-show hangout for everybody, and we can be a little more comfortable, interact around anything discussed here, anything streaming, anything vMix that I can answer. Happy to do that. If you can't, thank you very much for joining us for this show, and we'll see you next week. Otherwise, we'll see you in a few seconds. Take care. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the post-show hangout. As I mentioned, we have a wait a second. See neural net. What kind of shirt is that? So our company that makes LiveToAir is called NeuralNet, GNURAL, and so that's what you see over here on the shirt, and that's the sort of logo. But yeah, so this is something we actually love doing this show. There is great interaction, and Post Bunny, thank you, because it's I see that again you're actually engaged with the community, and we love that type of back and forth engagement. So thank you for joining. So we have Biz Shorty. He's saying, I used set layer the other day, but noticed if I added new inputs, the desired values changed. So, okay, so set input. When you do a set layer, it doesn't keep track of, like if I added a new input in front of something, it doesn't adjust the input numbers inside of set layer. So if I'm correct, I'd have to remember. But so if I put that in, things would break, and you wouldn't get the values changed. So you would have to go in there if you're doing that explicitly and say, I want to change it to, the next value because I added another thing in there. So yeah, if you move things around with the inputs you're using for the layers, I would expect if the ordering of those changed somehow, that would break it for the set layers. But otherwise, the set layer will still point back even if you moved the layered input somewhere else. It would still point to the same inputs it's using for the layers. So it shouldn't be because you weren't, Bishop say it shouldn't be because you weren't using scripting. I think that's just the way it works. It's not dynamic if you change the ordering. So for Post Bunny, collectively, I don't think telepathically we have the ability to link, though. I would be first in line if that was something we could have. It'd be it would be a great way to exchange information fast. But of course, it would depend on the bandwidth speed, because if it were slow, it would be annoying. So Bishorty is saying, yeah, in other words, it wasn't dynamic. So absolutely, that's the case. It isn't something that we can just dynamically update. You could change things in scripting where So let me take a step because you mentioned that with scripting. In scripting, I could look for the name of an input and use that input name to find the input number, and then use that input number to set a layer. So you could do it in scripting if you wanted to make it so that it was a dynamic thing where no matter where I put it, it just found the input with that name. So that is possible to do in scripting. It's probably a lot of work, and if you manage the way you have your preset, probably not something that would get in the way. But that is something I would really, I mean, since you said this, I'd really love that in vMix. If I had the ability to sort of do that without writing all that scripting. If I could come back and sort of tie it to, assign it an input and say, follow that input no matter where it ends up. So vMix kind of knows this when I make changes, that I moved input 2 to input 4, because I inserted 2 extra inputs or something. But it doesn't have that right now, but that would definitely be a cool thing to add to sort of the vMix suite of capabilities. So let's see. So Wise Master Builder is saying, thanks for sharing your scripts. Are they all created a few years ago and managed somehow without updates since then? Almost all the scripts that we have are created within a couple of weeks of the show. So we'll do some things that are pre-production where we have, the plan for what we want to do, and then we'll start to layer in if there's scripting or other things. So by and large, though, the scripting should be compatible, with earlier versions of vMix. And vMix has been very good about maintaining compatibility with future updates. So scripts that worked fine for vMix 24 or 25 also seem to work well in 26. So I don't think there's a lot of issue with the age of things, but no, everything we do typically is per show and, within a few weeks of that. So let's see. So we have Post Bunny asking, how long does the after show last? Like as long as you are getting questions. So yes, so as long as we are getting questions and people have things they want to find out about, we will run the after show for, as long as people need the show to run. So we have Biz Shorty. Biz, thank you. The output input was a great addition. The extra mixes are a real gift. Yeah, so, and LiveToAir is vMix call on steroids. So thank you for that. But yeah, I agree. Having those extra mixes opens up a world of things for us. And if you think about some of this, it's, if you're using things like masks, where if you wanted to stack something with a mask and a layer, that those don't always work. So mixes allow you to sort of apply masks and flatten it and push that into layers. So lots of things beyond just sort of what I showed here, where you can use it to isolate the input sources from the layering structure of different inputs that you set up. So that's another use case for that, but love those extra mixes. Best feature in vMix 26 for what, I tend to work around. So let's see. So Wise Master Builder says thank you. So thank you for being here. So Post Bunny, by and large, we do not hide any inside jokes or anything. So most of the things here, I mean, we're really just focused pretty much on creating content that people can apply, and we want to be as straightforward about it as possible. So most of what we do here is really a foundational element of, scripting and different vMix techniques. But the goal is that as a community, we will take these and share them. People will add new stuff, talk about it, request other things. And that back and forth, I think, in the sort of secondary market for these scripts, what people do with them is the real value. So we always encourage anybody, if you use a script from here and you take and do something with it, share it back and try to broaden the knowledge of the community, because I think that's good for all of us. So we have Ryo Caster. So he is, greetings from Brazil. I've been having some issues with audio feedback from vMix call. Is there anything I can do to solve this? So if I had to make a guess, vMix call will take and do its own mix minus of the different callers that you have. So it's sort of like for everybody that's connected via vMix call, I believe it just has one mix minus, and you can send different audio back. So if you're sending the guest audio back as the return audio source for vMix call, you'd end up with this type of echo problem. That would be my guess is what's probably happening here. So I would just look. So the other thing that you could be having problems if you're dealing with a remote guest, if it's not the guest hearing echo, but you're getting sort of that audio feedback on set. Some of that could be if your guests are not wearing headsets and they are just listening through speakers. And the interesting thing here is the browsers for like WebRTC connections do a really good job with suppressing feedback, so listening to what you're saying and stopping sort of that echo back. But if somebody's talking and you have a second guest and they're listening to that audio come back, now their mic is picking up the first guest talking. And so now, because these are coming into two different browsers, that echo cancellation doesn't work the same way. And that will give you that feedback loop where guest one talks, it's picked up on guest two's mic and fed back into the loop. Now you have this guest coming delayed from two different locations, their audio. So that's something, you know, if you can get guests to use headsets instead of speakers, it'll make things much easier. But with the mic, you know, microphone and placement, you can get, because some mics have really great rear rejection of audio. So if you could put a mic in front and have the speakers behind, that could work as well. So hopefully those two things may help. So let's see. So I'm asked if we have an Instagram or Facebook community page by Kane Muddock. So Kane, we have a Facebook community page, a Facebook group. So if you just go onto Facebook and look for Streaming Alchemy group, we're on there. This is where we post the notifications for the shows when we first put them out. And, you know, when people have other things they want to share, new product releases that are coming out or different techniques, that's another place that we definitely interact. The only thing with the community is we try to take things that are, you know, blatant. We don't allow anybody to post their streams, you know, like unless it's a stream about productions and other things, but not just I want views. But, you know, the community has been really good. And most of the things that we end up getting posted on there are interesting product updates or a discussion around different production techniques. So we really are happy with that group. And the other thing is there is a vMix scripting community group that a couple of us have sort of put together that's focused specifically on scripting for vMix. So that's another group that's also on Facebook that you could check out. So Kane Muddock also asked, have you ever done a studio tour? If not, I'd love to see one. So Kane, that is actually on our list of things to do. It'll probably be when we launch season 4, which will probably be end of February in next year. So we're going to run out the show. We have a lot of things we are updating and changing in the studio. So we'll probably, as we start off for season 4, we'll probably do the studio tour then. But thanks for asking about that. I love those too. I love getting to see how other people set things up. So I know it's a lot of fun. So let's see. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything here. So Biz Shorty is saying he definitely has to contact us so he can try. I'm assuming he's talking about LiveToAir. So absolutely, if you go to GNURALNET.com, you can just sign up for a 30-day free trial. And we'll give you any support you need to get that up and running. So let's see here. So yeah, so Ryocaster was saying that's exactly what happens. That he has one guest talk, and he's getting the feedback across. So yeah, that is probably it. It's just a question of having headsets for people, and I think that will solve most of the things that you have going on with that. So Biz Shorty is saying, in LiveToAir, can you send the guest a custom multi-view, or is the return feed they see a built-in one? So you can. So what the return feed going to the guest? There are two standard feeds that you can look at. So one is when they're off air, they can get one, which is how we do the thing with the green room. And then the other is when they're on air, they will see a second feed, and they can be anything you set up. Now, we let you do that for each individual input. So you could turn around and say, I'm sending one feedback to the host of a panel, if they're coming in remotely, which maybe has clocks and other things. And they could get a distinct audio feed, which hears the other guests, but may have somebody on the production side, a producer or somebody, telling them, okay, let's go to the next subject. Why don't we wrap that up and we'll talk about this now? So all of those things, and that can be distinct from what the other guests see. So we spent a lot of focus in this current version working through all those different combinations. And we have different things like different mix minus groups. So you could have panel A, in this case, be one mix minus group, and panel B be a separate mix minus group. And maybe you want them both live because you're doing two different rooms that you're going to have for guests. So you could, in one LiveToAir system, have both of those going live, different return video, different return audio, different mix minus groups, but all of that handled in LiveToAir. So yeah, there are lots of different ways to create custom multi-views, individual multi-views for an individual, for each individual channel, and multi-views that go, and return views that go back to everybody in a particular mix minus group. So hopefully a few ways to do that. So let's see. So Post Bunny was asking, what do we do for hobbies other than this? So we actually run a company, so there's not a lot of room for hobbies. Definitely, into technology generally speaking, and but between the show, running a company, and doing product development and sales and marketing, all the other things, not a lot of that. But I am a big football fan, so I love having football season back. So there's a little bit about us behind the scenes. But thank you. So I guess if we don't have any more questions to come in, we will probably call it a wrap for this week's show. So I just want to thank everybody who joined us. A special thank you for everybody who just took a try on us and looked at us for the first time. So definitely appreciate anybody new that's come in here. And, we are really excited about, what we want to do for the show coming up the last part of this year, but also for some of the things we want to focus on come the next season. And part of that is that I want to start to focus more on the TriCaster side and sort of split shows between vMix and TriCaster. And I think with scripting and some of the things we want to do, there's going to be a lot of overlap with that. We can come back and say, hey, you can run this script, and with changing a few small things, it would work with TriCaster or work with vMix. So that's something else we're really excited for as we move into next season. But definitely a lot going on. And, as always, if anybody is interested in trying out LiveToAir, just go to neuralnet, GNURALNET.com, and we can get you either a live demo, similar to this, but live, or we can, we can do something with getting you set up with a free trial. So I think that's a wrap for this week. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for hanging out for the post show. definitely enjoy this part as much as the actual show itself. And we'll see you all next week. Take care.